Hello and welcome to this Enlit Europe energy industry interview. My name is Nigel Blackaby and I'm joined by my colleague Paddy Young. And today we are delighted to be in conversation with Dolf Gielen. Dolf is the Director for Technology and Innovation at IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency. Dolf, welcome and thanks for sparing the time to talk to Enlit Europe.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Pleasure to have this talk.
Great. Well, it's a very timely conversation because this week we were delighted that IRENA and Enlit Europe were able to sign a partnership agreement, extending a relationship that we've had over a number of years. And I think our interests and goals are very much aligned, and we're delighted to have you on board as a partner.
Yes, also for us, we see this as a very positive development. Cooperation has been good over the previous years, and we hope we can expand it further. And with our government membership and your focus on the private sector, there's a great synergy.
Great. Well, the purpose of our conversation today was to explore a little bit about the Global Renewable Outlook Report, Energy Transformation 2050, that was published by IRENA just last month. So it's very fresh. So I thought I'd start by sort of asking you what prompted IRENA to commission a report like this, and kind of what resources you drew on. I know you were one of the main authors, but yeah, we'd be interested to know what brought this report about.
Yes, we've been issuing similar reports now for some years. Every year we do an update of what do we see as the long-term potential for energy transition and what would be the pathway to put that into place. And we are in a privileged position to do so because we collect a lot of information from our members about the technology status and outlook, about the economics of renewables, latest cost data, about the potentials, etc. So we take all our data and we feed them into a model, and then we get a picture of how that transition can go, and that is very much welcomed by our 161 member countries. But it also helps ourselves in-house to prioritize our work.
So turning to the report itself, I mean, what does it reveal about the main opportunities arising from what we might call a renewable-based energy transition?
Yeah, so we find that there are a number of key pillars to the energy transition. Of course, renewable power is a key one. We think that the share of renewable power needs to increase globally from around 26% today up to 86% by 2050. So that is a key one. But to make that happen, you need a lot more flexibility in the power system. So and that is a whole range of technology options, business models, operational practices, and other things. Another key strategy we identified is electrification of end users. So you take that renewable power and use it to charge EVs, you use it for heat pumps, you use it in industrial processes, you use it to produce green energy carriers, for example, green hydrogen or even synthetic energy carriers. So that's also a second key pillar. And then we have the traditional renewables, if you like. So things like hydropower and bioenergy are also very important still, and continue to grow, have to continue to grow also into the future. And then there is at the moment a lot of attention for green hydrogen. So that is also a way to enhance that sector coupling. So to use more of that green power and to clean up the end use sectors. And then finally, of course, if you really want to go to zero carbon, then we need really innovative solutions in steelmaking, in today's petrochemical industry, in aviation, etc.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Interesting you're mentioning green hydrogen. Obviously, that's a focus and something that we get a lot of interest, certainly in our media products, certainly articles read, Dolf. So that's very interesting. Obviously, understanding challenges is very important in these situations. So what does the report tell us about the principal challenges, barriers in progressing this green transition? Is it technical, financial, regulatory? What are these challenges that are covered?
Well, of course, we see some transition already happen, but what we need is an acceleration of this transition. And at the moment, let's say the policy environment, the enabling framework, is not the same everywhere. So,
yeah, that would be wonderful.
There is clearly an opportunity to improve that here and there. Then what is important for investors is a credible long-term outlook to make investments with a lifespan of several decades. And we're talking significant investments. We're talking investments in the order of 3 trillion per year. So that's a lot of money, and that money is out there, but there needs to be some reassurance that we can recover that money.
Yeah. That leads me to the next question, actually, because the report talks about required investment, and the numbers that come up are just sort of mind-boggling. 100 trillion by 2050 was one figure there. I'm curious, how do you come up with that number? And do you sort of look at mechanisms to sort of measure the sort of return on investment eventually?
Yeah, so we've done a bottom-up analysis, looking sector by sector, technology by technology, region by region, or even country by country, what can be done. And based on that, we've identified an economically viable potential. And we find that the cost-benefit ratio from a societal perspective is very positive. So for every dollar invested, the return is in between $3 and $8.
Okay.
At least for the first 70% of emissions reduction. Gets a little bit lower to about 1 to 4 for the last 30%, but still it's positive.
Still investable, yeah.
Now the part of these investments are already today economically viable. So let's say in the power sector, solar PV, wind, etc. We know. Part of it still has 2 issues. First of all, that there are externalities which are not priced in today's fossil fuels, health externalities, CO2 externalities. And second, some of these technologies that we know are out there and could be deployed are today still a little bit expensive. So you need to buy down these costs by initial investments to get to the cost reductions and the cost levels you need for widespread deployment. I mean, we talked about green hydrogen. That's a typical example. You need to invest in about 50 gigawatts of hydrogen electrolyzers. Today we have only worldwide less than half a gigawatt installed hydrogen electrolyzers. So there is an investment needed. There's a role for governments to play in that initial phase, but it's also clear that there is now great interest from the private sector and from the financing sector to pursue these pathways. So if you express it in another unit, so dollars per ton of CO2. So for the initial 70% emissions reduction, the average cost is about $30–35 per ton of CO2. It goes a little bit up for the last 30%, and then we're talking more than $100 per ton of CO2. But still, these are price indicators which are not off the chart. So our conclusion is that it makes sense to go for this transition.
No, wonderful.
Yeah, you talk about that variation. I'm curious to know what you see as the low-hanging fruit, you know, that where priority should be given.
So standard rule is energy efficiency first. There's a lot of cost-efficient energy efficiency potential that is currently not fully deployed for various reasons. So one of the issues is that a lot of it is quite small scale. So you need to somehow aggregate that, build bigger packages to actually deploy that. I mean, the typical sector is the building sector. So we know that there's an enormous buildings energy efficiency potential, but that the actual deployment is for renovation is only in the order of 1% per year. But we need something like 3% per year of buildings to be renovated. So a lot can be done there. Then I mentioned the renewable electricity generation potential. So if you look at the latest costs we see for solar PV, for wind, best locations are 2 cents per kilowatt hour or even lower. So that's not only cost effective on a life cycle costing basis, but that's even cost effective on the marginal cost basis. If you compare the full investment of these renewables with the marginal cost of fossil-based generation. So, and that's why you see currently a very strong development of projects in this area. And then I mentioned electrification. So electromobility is an emerging trend now, but there is still a little bit of initial cost that needs to be dealt with, but these costs are coming down now very rapidly.
Yeah. So the report I know is global, and I think it sort of identified some differences between regions and countries, and whether you can speak to that a little bit, and then perhaps say specifically where Europe's role is as a sort of leading party in the transition.
Yeah, so Europe is indeed a global leader. So the ambition to get to net zero emissions by 2050 is really important as a long-term guide for investments. We recently had the clean energy packages, new objectives for efficiency and renewables. Now we will get even more ambitious CO2 targets soon. So the ambition levels for both may go up further. So these are very important signals. Strong interest into hydrogen, and especially green hydrogen in a European context. Very important signal again in which direction to go. So and I think also the recognition that there is a strong link between energy policy and industry policy, and that this is an opportunity to build the industries of the future is very important. And of course, in today's context of the health crisis, also the opportunity to build jobs and to create new areas for economic growth are very important. So we see that strongly in a European context. We also see a lot of efforts in some other places. For example, in a lot of the new technologies are also deployed on a massive scale in China, which I think is also a very interesting development, because that's the largest energy consuming country in the world, with the largest CO2 emissions. So if we can achieve something there, that really matters on a global scale. And of course, there are also other countries that see this as a growth sector with important opportunities. I would say it's a global trend towards energy transition.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I think it was quite interesting. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU Commission, there's a quote. I won't quote specifically, but in essence, she was saying that we will leave our children debt. Let's also leave them a habitable, inhabitable planet. And I think there's a lot of talk about this and the green recovery. And I think it's a great opportunity personally. I don't have all the insights, but I'm very curious to what your view is, Dolf, on this green recovery, and is it something that is really possible?
Yeah, there are different, let's say, different responses to this crisis. And of course, there's an immediate health response. But what we're talking now is a little bit different. We reach now a phase of post-crisis, and how can we get the people to work again? How can we get to new growth? And if you see the amounts that are mentioned in the news, I mean, it's mind-boggling. We're not talking billions anymore. We're talking hundreds of billions or even trillions, and almost on a weekly basis, you see announcements like that. So that's really a lot of money, and it's also clear that you will not have this type of money coming around every year. This is a once in a life opportunity with a lot of government money involved, and so there is also an importance that governments spend that money wisely. And first question is, well, should you spend it on energy, or should you spend it on something else? But then within energy, the question is, do you spend it on the industries of the past, or do you spend it on the industries of the future? And we would argue that it's smarter to spend it on the industries of the future. That means then, why not spend it on, for example, buildings renovation? Why not spend it on new renewable power generation, on new infrastructure, be it grid infrastructure, be it on the hydrogen infrastructure? So why not spend it on EVs or EV charging? There is so many opportunities now in this energy transition where you could spend that money wisely, that it would be really a mistake not to spend it that way.
And the jobs that would flow from that, I guess, would be a real boost to economies.
Yes. So as part of this Global Renewables Outlook, we looked at the job opportunities. So today, there's about 14 million jobs in renewables. We see a potential to grow that to more than 40 million jobs in renewables in the coming decades. And then if you look then at the net jobs effect, there would still be a gain. So you lose some jobs in fossil, but you gain many more jobs in this clean energy.
No, I think we could talk all morning, Dolf. It's been absolutely fascinating, really great insights. And I think for anyone that's watching this, I suggest that they go to www.irena.org and take a look at the report, the Global Renewable Outlook, and it's well worth a read, and you'll have lots more insights along the lines of this. Dolf, thank you very much on behalf of Nigel and myself. It's been wonderful, really, really informative, and very much enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Paddy and Nigel. Pleasure.